Hello and welcome back to the Property Roundup on iPropertyRadio with myself, Karl Tallon. Today we're coming to you from the offices of OnlineApplication with Karl Deeter. Karl, thank you so much for allowing us in. Your space is definitely the funkiest that I've been in for a long time. It's very cool.
Yeah, I play in a band with a lady and she's a painter. Like not like a art, paints houses and stuff as one of her other things she does other than playing music full time. And when we moved into this office, I said, give us something, maybe a bright colour. And I thought maybe she might paint it like, a bright blue. I don't know what's coming through the camera, but it's striped. So it's like pink stripes, green stripes, blue stripes, yellow stripes. It's mad looking.
I love it. I love it. We walked in and actually there were so many interesting, and it's actually more about, it's not just about the colour. It's interesting. There's personality, and actually it looks like somewhere that would cheer you up. Today it's been raining so heavily in Dublin. Actually, to walk in, it kind of brightens your day and makes you smile.
Yeah, we exposed all the rafters. There's some great ironwork up in the ceiling. It won't come across in the camera. We've got daisy chained low wattage lights, hanging plants, some cool booths for doing video calls. It's a really cool space. In fact, if you're going to spend as much time working as me and my team do, you need something like this to just kind of, it's one of the few things that takes the edge off the long hours, I guess.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And your team are working away, even though we've annoyed them a little and distracted them a little. Tell us what they're doing out there.
Yeah, so we're basically building the next generation of mortgage and insurance technology. So OnlineApplication is a company. It turns 5 years old this September, and we set out to build a solution that would make mortgages and insurance easier, faster, and better for everybody. So what that means is we have several constituents. We're a business to business, so we actually sell our software to brokers and to banks and insurance companies. Ultimately, though, we build with the consumer in mind. I've always thought if you reach the end consumer in the best possible manner, you're going to win. That's my belief. I genuinely believe that. So we try and build this stuff that makes their world wonderful. And so they have to win. This idea that everybody wins is kind of the ethos of what we're trying to do. You have to make sure that the advisor wins. And for us, that typically tends to be brokers who broker either mortgages or life and pensions. And for them to win, it has to be easy to use, simple, solving a lot of the problems that they have, keeping them secure, creating automations, workflows, document management, compliance, security, GDPR. We've got a lot of AI tools coming out now, and that's going to even revolutionize things even further. And then, so they win with that. And then the institutions have to win because, if it's not serving their needs, they're not going to work with us either. So we work with say banks, and so that our product integrates into them. So we have integrations with Haven, which is AIB. We have a really great integration with Bank of Ireland, which is was a huge project. So now when you hit send on our system, it actually spits it right into the Bank of Ireland system. We're bringing a new lender into the country this year. We have helped to bring in a new lender last year called Newell Mortgages, and their system and our system are like a hand in glove. So they had effectively our blueprint to work off when they were building their system. So now that kind of bank integration is like hit a button and it's like boom, just done. It's so amazing. We've built integrations with Avant Money, and we're building another one with them for their new system. We built one for Finance Ireland. Unfortunately, they stopped lending, but look, that's nothing to do with us, but that's what we're doing there. On the life insurance side, we've done some integrations with Royal London and New Ireland. But what I envision is basically a world where in time, you should be able to get your whole mortgage application done. I mean, everything to do with it, and kind of sub a half hour, get it into the bank within another half hour and have an approval back, and potentially 5 minutes after that again. We've even seen times where when you send it to a bank that you're seeing offers, actual genuine loan offers coming back sub 1 hour, which is like the speed of light compared to how things were before. So like we're doing some serious, for our world, it's world altering. For everyone who's not like doing this every day, you might not feel that like they're doing something big, but for the world that we operate in, we're taking everyone from what was digitally almost effectively the Stone Age to the next generation and AI.
Yeah, Karl, you're making it sound almost like a before and after, but actually, just for full transparency here, behind the cameras today, we have a mortgage applicant who has been chasing a mortgage, not through online application, although that might change, for kind of 8 months, but seriously for 2 or 3 months, and all paperwork and everything finally submitted and approved almost 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So when you talk about sub 1 hour, like, is that really possible in the ecosystem we have in Ireland?
Yeah, go interview the guys at Neo Mortgages. They'll tell you that, you know, it's a real thing, and it's only going to get even better. Tell
me a little about the mortgage market, because you talked about kind of introducing a new lender last year, another one this year. We know we know high profile exits from the Irish market, and continually we're hearing about the mortgage market in Ireland contracting. Is that still the situation?
That was a trend for a while. We kind of self-induced that by making a regulatory regime that was kind of hostile to lenders. There were some mistakes made in the past, in particular in the post-financial crisis days, where, you know, the banks could just do nothing right. We had a kind of an anti repossession regime, which like on a social level is very admirable, but on a kind of a functioning business level then actually causes a lot more problems, where if you're going to lend money, like ultimately you have to be able to get that back. You know, like I would always have a problem with someone doing a job they can't get fired for no matter what they do.
Yeah.
And in the same way, you can't have it that you nearly can't repossess a house. And people say, well, there has been repossessions. Nothing along the lines of what would have happened in any other country in the entire world. And I think that was a policy error. Ultimately, and that was what, you know, KBC said when they were leaving. That was one of the reasons why I think Ulster Bank left. Now, you talk about high profile exits. Yes, it's true. And granted, New Money might not be a high profile entrant, but Revolut has been very clear that they're going to be entering the market, and we'll be working with them someday, I'm sure. And you know, that's a high profile new entry. So and we're bringing in another new lender who's not either of those companies. And that's going to, you know, increase competitive forces, going to make something bigger, better, faster. So I think that you have to look at it in the balance of what's possible with what you've got. Because you can always say, yeah, like, you know, in Iceland you can get a mortgage in like 3 days. In Estonia you can do it in 2 days. Like some of the Nordic countries, there's no privacy effectively. So all their systems are tied together. Like I can look up and find out what you earned last year. When you have systems like that, you can do stuff real fast. We don't have that. So given what we do have, we're making massive fundamental change. And I know you spoke about your mortgage applicant behind the camera, and you know,
that's our producer Katie, and we've shared her woes. One of the big challenges we want to change the narrative is from all these 20 and 30 and 40-year-olds at home with their parents to start looking at the parents who have these 20, 30 and 40-year-olds returning home to the nest. That's a whole other conversation for another day.
But why do you think they help them get the deposit? They're buying them off. You know, that's effectively the ransom payment to leave. But sorry about that.
We're being very unfair to our producer Katie. There's going to be some really dodgy angles today.
But the thing is, like we ultimately, like I said, we're empowering brokers, and I really genuinely believe in brokers. I believe in their better ability to deliver a more independent form of advice. You're not allowed to use the word independent really easily. A more impartial form of advice. And all I can say is, from what I know of the situation you've mentioned, the brokerage is not using our system, so they probably should. It'd be great if they did. We want to get all the brokers working with us, because the more that we get brokerage behind pro-broker channels, rather than channels that are like for some other product that gets hacked into an Irish scenario, or something that might be more of a bank product or, you know, credit union product, the more we get brokers behind brokers, the more we'll be able to deliver for them. And really, like, I see the Great War as not being like one broker versus another, or one bank versus another bank. I actually see it as a channel war of intermediaries versus direct. And people say, well, you know, cut out the middleman. Cut out the middleman is fine if you're buying an air ticket. But when you're using something like a financial service, where one provider is legally not allowed to tell you about better pricing elsewhere, that's where it becomes a mistake. Because if you go into, say, you know, say you walk into some lender, I won't name a lender, but just let's call it lender A, and they know that lender B has a price that would save you thousands upon thousands over the life of the loan. They are not allowed to tell you about that. They can only talk about what they have, whereas a broker will always tell you about that. And that's why I still think that, despite this idea of the death of the intermediary, the death of the middleman, the death of the broker, it's just not true when it comes to financial services. Intermediaries effectively are most of the market.
Well, I can remember something, you used to write the mortgages chapter for my Irish Property Buyers Handbooks years ago, a decade ago, when we were all just scratching to survive our way out of the crash.
It might have been even more than a decade, to be fair.
Yeah, but do you know, one thing you always said to me, which really stuck, was that maybe the difference between going direct to a bank and using a broker, and this was very relevant at that time when there was very few mortgages being given out back in kind of 2011, 2012, 2013. Where you explained, the way you positioned it to me was that the mortgage broker is like, the broker is more like somebody doing a business plan. They're presenting you in the best light to the bank, as opposed to you walking into the bank and not knowing what to show the bank or how to position it. Is that accurate? Have I remembered it correctly?
Did I really say that?
You did.
And it impressed you?
It did.
Okay, then I still believe all the same stuff.
No, but is that one of the fundamental differences, that when you're doing this thing, multiple times, day in, day out, that you just know what the banks, it's a little bit like your Leaving Cert. If you were sitting your Leaving Cert every year, you'd start to learn what the examiners want to know.
Look, if you look at industries where intermediaries are persistently still very important to the industry, you say to yourself, like, why is that? What is it that they're doing? Why is it that they're better able to do that for you? So let's look at places where you see intermediaries. You've got real estate agents, and they're an intermediary between the buyer and the seller, or the seller and the buyer, I should say, because they're hired by the sellers. So real estate agents, and they are persistent. There's never been a direct market that was truly successful. You do have direct markets in some countries, but in Ireland, in advanced economies, tends to go through intermediaries. If you look at, jobs that are in the main, the higher level jobs, they quite often go through recruiters. And again, why is it? How do they know what to look for, like the company doesn't get? And mortgages are the same. So what is it about, say, going for a job that if someone who knows how to screen a candidate day after day, spot gaps in your CV, figure out if your skill set for whatever you're doing is actually relevant to the job itself? Why don't companies all just hire, a direct HR person who does all the interviews, all this kind of stuff, finds all the candidates, does the ads on the job sites? Now, some do, but you will find for the stuff that's the really high-end stuff, it still goes through intermediaries.
See, you used the word intermediaries, and I think that almost is positioning people as a problem. That's where that middleman comes from, where it's actually, when you talk about estate agents, there's so much now that could be done directly. If people wanted to sell their home directly, if they felt they could list it on a property website and attract buyers. So what they're missing then is the advice, the professionalism, the experience of understanding the market and doing this many times a day,
I can
every
tell
day.
you right now, if you were ever to sell a property direct, you could take a property that an estate agent would close on and you will derail it.
Yeah.
Because it's too close to you. Like, a buyer might come in and say, this house is trash and it's not worth the money and the colours are horrible. Estate agent, whatever, boom, boom, rolls off them like water off a duck's back. Whatever, here's the price, here's why it's good, it has a great location. No, this decor is miserable, you could repaint it for $4,000. Whereas if you're the person who actually did that, you'd be like, you don't like my decor?
You don't deserve my house.
That's it,
Yeah.
Like, there's a whole area in economics called the endowment effect, which is like when you own something, you value it one way, when someone else owns something, you value it another. And people tend to have a higher price on the things that they own and have had a stake in. But all of these things aside, you need the middle man or woman. That intermediary effect is great for negotiating things that would otherwise become very difficult, highly kind of personalized in a bad way, as in you'd take it too personally to be able to execute on it. Like, if you walk into a bank, they are versed in ways to talk you down off the disappointment of, we'd love to talk to you in 6 months. If only you had a bit more savings. We need you to do this. Like, there's a whole thing of like to gently let you flow down the river. Yeah. Broker will be telling you, look, they said no. Why? They said you need this, this, and this. No good. But listen, there's this other bank and they will do it. Yeah. And blah. And here's their prices. Is it the best price? Well, the bank you went to first, that is the best price. But they're saying no. So, like, let's go down the list. Boom. A whole area of your application time, of your everything else, you don't have to worry about it. They figured it out for you. They spoke to the consultant in the bank who deals with brokers.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, quick no. Fast no is good. Slow no, terrible. Yeah. So let's go down to the next choice. The next choice, slightly more. You'll pay €30 more a month. Yes, I understand it's about 360 a year and blah over the life of a loan. That's about $7,000. It's all future values. Maybe you refinance, maybe you pay down quick. Let's focus on getting you what you need.
Yeah.
And that's this loan so you can buy that house. Because no one actually wants a mortgage.
Do you know?
Like no one in the world ever said, like, I would love to be in debt. You want the house, and this is part of it.
So much technology innovation. It's really interesting how it's evolved. So back in 2015, 16, 17, we were seeing a lot of prop tech and even and some fintech coming through, and it was very consumer led. So it was consumers who had an issue in the marketplace, and so they were usually spot on about the problem that they identified. And they might even have been right about the solution that they devised or created, but they could never get or rarely get the market traction they needed. They couldn't get the market to adopt the solution they were selling. Whereas by kind of once we were into kind of 2020 and onwards, we started to see much more market-led innovation. Yeah. And I would describe yours as very much market-led, because you were an operating mortgage brokers since how long are you in the marketplace?
2003. Yeah, 2003. Yeah, over 20 years.
So it's taking the innovation. So just explain to me, just take me back to the early foundations of online application. Would it be accurate to say you created the solution you wished had existed for you and your team?
Yeah, so basically I was working in a brokerage years ago, and I'd said to the guy running the place, like, I think we should create like an internet brokerage. I think the internet is the big thing. And he was like, Karl, look, just focus on hitting your target. Like, stop going.
The internet will never take off.
Not that, but it was just kind of like stay in your lane.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn it, I really think this could be a thing. Let's go. So anyway, I left. I started my own company. We had a lot of hard years. Suddenly started to get a lot of success very quick. We got up to damn near 40 people working with us in 2006. Financial crisis came, it was like boom, like we shrunk down to like 5 people. And the mortgage market had gone from like, for every €100 that was in the mortgage market, there was a 90% collapse in turnover, and the banks cut the procurement fees that they pay to brokers by 50%. So for every €100 that used to be in the system, you had €2.50. And it was like, you are surviving on fumes, have to go into real emergency mode. I call those.
You have to start writing, guest writing chapters for books.
Playing music for a living. So I kind of call that my master's degree years. I learned a huge amount. Going through a catastrophe can actually be, as destructive as it is, an amazing experience for self-development, self-realization, understanding the important aspects of business, understanding how to stem the bleeding, how to be sustainable in a time of crisis. It's an amazing skill.
You describe it in a healthy way. Every day I'm on a building site, I still see the remnants of trauma in that. I see it in my own business, how I run my own business, some of the practices I've built up. The trauma from the crash is evident across the industry.
Yeah, but like I'm fully convinced. Like I've got like 2008 in my mind is almost wiped. Like I've actually don't have that much memories of a lot of parts of the crash because it was just so like head wrecking. I stopped wearing shirts because I'd be ironing shirts on a Sunday night and I'd start getting panic attacks thinking like, do I need 5 of these? What if I close down on Tuesday? I only need 2. Well, I just iron 2 and then on Tuesday I'll iron 3 more if we make it to Tuesday. Like, it was horrible. It affected my health. I became a celiac. I got an autoimmune disease from it. I genuinely believe that was partly triggered by the stress of that time. So yeah, it's really desperate. But to get back to it, what's the genesis of the business? So in 2006, like long before people were talking about cloud-based services and stuff, we actually built a cloud-based mortgage platform that we ran our business on in Irish mortgage brokers, and we were like trying to get it integrated into banks and things. They said no, crisis comes, we down tools on the system. The system was very robust, really good.
And had you built that internally?
Yeah. I bumped into a friend on Pier Street one day, and he's like, wow, I haven't seen you in ages. What are you doing? He's like, oh, I've been building computer systems. I'm actually out of a job. I'm coming down looking for something. I was like, wow, this is pure synchronicity. Like I know you. I need you. Come work with me. And we built this online system for Irish mortgage brokers, which like was up for accolades and awards because we had online documents before everybody else, like even before the banks. We had that the client could log in and check their application, like really amazing stuff. We were going to do such amazing things had things continued. And I was also being influenced by people who had gone on to do like big technical things. He went on, did some big technical stuff, sold a business to Engine Yard, started a new business. He now runs like a venture capital fund. There was another guy who I was chatting with a lot. He ended up forming a company that was called Intercom. They went back, like big, you know, like they're actually a tech unicorn now. And so these were the guys who I was listening to them, looking at what they were doing, and they were kind of rubbing off on me. Anyway, eventually, you know, it's 2018. I'm thinking we should start working on this again. And again, I've always had this guiding hand of fate in my life that I feel very, very fortunate for. And when I say the guiding hand of fate, it's not that I just like, there's a couple signs that come to me. I mean, really, like this time around, I hooked up with an old friend of mine from school who, like, we've known each other for over 30 years. And I was chatting to him about this. He's like, I'd love to work on something like that. And I was like, but are you available? He's like, I am. He says, I'm just finishing writing a book. He wrote a book about accelerated mobile pages, which is like this tech stuff. Anyway, cut a long story short, so he comes on board. And then our first engineer that came on board, I play music, I play gigs every week, and there was this kid that worked in the bar, and I always admired his work ethic. You know, he was always, boom, working his nuts off. And I was like, wow, what are you doing? He said, I'm doing computer science. I was like, when you graduate, let me know. You know, I might have some work for you.
Yeah.
I didn't realize we were going to actually form a whole company around this idea. You know, he comes on board. He's like an amazing guy, love him to bits. You know, his best friend then joins us. And just the way that our team has been put together, it's always just been as if like there's this theme of fate throughout it. And so we said, look, we're going to do this for all brokers now. You know, I realized it had to be bigger, had to be better. There was another company that had gone out and raised like millions of euro to do something similar in mortgages. And I was like, I know.
Were they Ireland based?
Yeah. And I was like, I know we can do better than them for brokers because they were all bankers. And so we went out and raised money. You know, and talk about bad timing, like Jesus. We go out in February of 2020 and, you know, companies like, yeah, we're interested, venture capital, yeah, we'd love to talk to you, this is cool, love it, blah. Next of all, COVID hits. Everyone's like, no, not interested, you know, can't be involved in this, too much uncertainty, you know, property market's gonna fall, you're gonna suffer. And like I expected the property market to crash because the economy shut down. Totally wrong on that, by the way, obviously. So then through that, we still found a way to raise the funds. We found some investors who were like, could see across the curve, had a lot of business savvy, with some great investors in this company. And they could see that like with the expertise that we had, with the past expertise,
and with deep domain knowledge.
The validation and the domain knowledge, yeah, that we had something that was worth looking at. So like we went from kind of zero turnover to, you know, we're going to be up in the 3 million recurring income this year. Like to do that in that amount of time with all the tumultuous things that are happening, you know, it's been really impressive, wonderful to be part of. But that was basically where this company came from. It was like all these series of events where one thing led to the next, to where the people that I was meeting had influenced me, had become part of my life, had become part of the project, previous successes and failures that all built into knowing what to do the second time around. And so like people joke like or laugh. I say it anyway. I don't care what people think. I really believe that I'm fulfilling my destiny. I genuinely believe I was put on the earth to fix this one thing. I'm gonna fix it. I'm totally obsessed with it. I love coming into work. I love what I do. I'm super fascinated by it. I'm gonna make mortgages and insurance easier, faster, better for everybody. That's genuinely, like if I do that and I get struck by lightning, job done. I'll go. I'm happy. Because that's actually what I'm about.
I love that you're so passionate and so mission driven. So you know what the end point is, although I deeply suspect when you're actually there you won't recognise and you'll just keep going. There will always be a new end point. But say in terms of what you believe will make mortgages cheaper, better, faster, easier, all of those things, where do you think you are now on that journey?
Well, you see, the problem is it's like if you're sailing from the nighttime into the dawn. In the nighttime, if you're shining a light, you can see 100 meters ahead. But then as the vista changes and as time goes by, suddenly that visibility becomes further and further and more expansive. Like when I started off, there was no AI. We were looking at a few like AI solutions back in 2021, and this was like high-end stuff that might like read a pay slip and it would take a year to do. You can get stuff now that'll do that in a short amount of time. So it becomes more expansive, and the issue with that is this like expanding bullseye effect. Added to that is the fact that I will never be satisfied with the completion point. Like I don't know what success feels like. Like if you said to me, Karl, name some successes in your life. I've got my wife, my kids, and after that, nothing. Like that's my success. I have a family that I love. Beyond that, none of it means anything to me. Like I don't feel like as if, oh, you succeeded. So I will never know when I'm done, because I'm not born for being done. I'll just keep on building to the point of no return. However, if I was forced to say like, you've got to describe it, then I would say, if you could ever get to a point where you could do a mortgage by saying, you know, my fingerprint on a phone, my selfie, a picture of the property, and a load of online validation, and that's my mortgage application finished, that's what it looks like.
Do you think that's possible in our lifetime?
Yeah. I think shits that you can't even imagine is possible in our lifetime. If you look at the speed of advancement of humanity, like 70 years ago, like there was basic level microprocessors and things, you know, basic level card punch machines. I turned 50 this year. You know, look at the tech, look at where Pac-Man was in, you know, the early 1980s versus the full immersive virtual reality games now. And I'm not saying that like the world has phased off games, but like things like CRISPR that reads genetics, you know, that's like 10 years old, and now it's being used to potentially bring back mammoths from like the Ice Age and stuff. Like there is just stuff happening now that is so mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And especially with the dawn of AI, like...
Have you read Nexus?
No.
It's a really interesting book that kind of charts the journey, but in a very logical way, of technology, but it does single out AI in how it's different to all the other tech innovations and evolutions that we've seen insofar as actually everything else was to aid decision making. This can be decision making, and that was that fundamental difference that is shifting us beyond anything that has been created previously.
You see, when it comes to AI, I'm kind of divided on it, because on one hand, the actual world, the real world, is a physical world, you know, based on like biochemical interactions and electricity and organisms. And AI, it like can help with the information side of that, but it can't kind of do that. So you need hardware machines, you need food, you need actual medicine that can be consumed by humans. You need to be improving the lives of actual living people. And, you know, AI, I think, will help with a lot of that. So I was in India last week, mind blown. Every time I go there, my mind gets blown. Like the level of construction, the sophistication, the delivery services, the Uber for cash, small rides in like little tuk-tuk type vehicles. It's an amazing place.
Right, but they weren't coming off the same base. Do you think coming off a base of not having had the same banking systems, they were able to jump straight to innovation as opposed to having maybe some of the decades of
legacy
nonsense
systems
we've had?
Yeah, legacy systems definitely slow you down, and that's nothing to do with nonsense. That has to do with legacy systems. So like in India, there's a thing called UPI, Universal Payments, or whatever. But there's these barcodes, and you just go on your phone, boom, and you pay for anything anywhere. Everyone uses it, and you need an Indian bank account, etc. If you're not from there, you're locked out of that whole system. But I was looking at that, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. That is mind-blowingly amazing. Whereas we would have like tap your phone and tap your card, and they're just not fully gone. It's not even like have a card on your phone registered in your wallet. It's just a pure ether.
Did you ever consider setting up online application outside of Ireland to trial it, to really see? Because I always think that people, startups particularly, when they talk about Ireland being, you know, when Enterprise Ireland say Ireland's a great test market, it actually isn't. Ireland is a very, very difficult test market. Yeah, so basically, like I'm not a great believer in regrets, because I like, unless you invent a time machine, regret has no foundation in anything.
The only thing
well, if you learn, now there's a difference between regret and reflect. You know, there's this whole thing, you don't learn from experience, you learn from reflecting on the experience. Yeah. So I think if we reposition regret as reflecting, so reflecting back.
Yeah, so if I was to reflect then, to use your verbiage, if I was to reflect, what I should have done is created the cloud-based system in 2006. What I should have done at the time was left here, moved back to America and just done it there. And I would probably be a billionaire. Right,
but would you have then, you said your hallmark of success is your family. If you had done that, would they have been happy?
You never know. Although, like my current wife, she's the only wife I've ever had. I just call her that. I said to annoy her. No, we've been together since I was 19. You know, so I would have liked to think that we would have stood the test of moving back to the USA. I mean, she lived in America before, so and I would like to think that, you know, if there is any inclination for a life that's meant to be, that my kids would be my kids, and their victories and failures would be broadly the same.
But would the opportunities for the business, do you feel, have been different?
In America, that market is as wide as the world of economics. It's as deep as the whole world. So, like, if you're a 1%er, if you hold 1% of the market in America, you are successful beyond your wildest dreams. Whereas in Ireland, like, you know, we're like more than half of all brokerages that are, you know, seriously in the market, you know, and you know, we get by, but it's not like we're not like knocking the socks off the whole world. You have to remember in the USA, all of Ireland is roughly, in terms of the land mass, is about the size of South Carolina, and population-wise is about the population of South Carolina. So, like, that's the market when you're here.
What does that say about the scalability of online application? And my mind is immediately going back to the investors that you said are great investors and they absolutely believe in you. But I mean, if you already have 50% of the market, what does that say about the scaling challenges for the future?
Yeah, I think if I was to be fair about one of the things that I didn't achieve, it was to deliver international expansion to a really meaningful way. We actually had an American product, and it was good, it was functional, and we wanted to really roll it out about 3 years ago. But to roll out there, given the amount of money we had raised, which was like in the single 7 figures, you know, it was like €1 million. People might say, well, it's a huge amount of money. In tech startups, that's not. To do that, we would have needed like, you know, 5 or 10. And at the time that we had delivered that and shown proof of concept and found buyers in America who were using our product, at the same time, you had this serious shrinkage in available cash for startup businesses and for, you know, scaling businesses. So again, like I always seem to be getting caught in these perfect storms of like startup brokerage, financial crisis, you know,
don't take it so personally. We work across PropTech Ireland, and I can tell you, for startups, there are very few good times and easy times to raise money.
Yeah, no, I don't mean like that. I guess what I'm saying is that, like, I've just never expected to have it easy. I know the hard work that it takes, and I embrace that. And the one thing I also know now, from a European perspective, and certainly which makes the likes of Revolut or other companies that work across different countries all the more fascinating to me, is that there is a depth, certainly within, say, mortgages, which is so complex that to replicate that in another European country, whatever about the language differences, the regulatory differences, the customary differences, the differences in documentation types, what they do, how they do it, you know, it's mind-boggling. Like I MC an event every year in Czechia called the Digital Mortgage Conference. People come from everywhere. They come from as far away as, like, you know, the kind of Far East, South America, not North America too much, but certainly across all of North Africa, all of Europe, good dose of kind of Middle East and all the Nordic countries and Baltic countries. And it's just mind-blowing. And I can tell you now that no one, I say no one, only a small handful of companies in the digital lending space have ever made it beyond one jurisdiction or a second jurisdiction which is highly compatible.
Yeah.
So like Ireland and the UK, common language, not compatible. They're on a UK system, they're outside of Europe. we're European system, etc. But if you take somewhere like, say, Czechia and Slovakia, they sometimes have compatible systems. If you take, say, Austria and Germany, sometimes you've got compatible systems. So it's not just about the language, it's about the actual other aspects of what the overruling powers are. Like, are you on European regulation? Are you on certain, standards? Do your bank accounts work together? All these different things. So it's there's a layer of complexity in solving a problem, which is sometimes, when that problem is a niche problem, it makes it hard to make it expansive.
Yeah. But then you're back to that scaling challenge. Well, then tell me, what is in the future for online application?
Oh,
let's keep it small. Let's say the next 12 to 18 months.
Well, I think there's still a huge amount of potential in the Irish market, and what I want to do basically is be the unified system for brokers. So because we make things like, basically, if you take this is all life and pensions brokers and this is all mortgage brokers. All mortgage brokers do life and pensions, but not all life and pensions brokers do mortgages. So we're creating the systems so that now they talk to each other. So I want to make this solution that really makes it like a one platform vision for the market. I want to consolidate the market more. I know that we can easily be doing twice as much revenue as we're doing now. If we get it right with the life and pension side, there's still massive opportunity for innovation in that area, because the life companies tend to innovate for themselves and try and get brokers to use their kit. Whereas what I'd be saying is, no, I want to make brokers using their kit and you innovate to help them be more empowered. If we get that right, there's another 5 amazing years with massive potential out there. And that's going to be decided in the next 12 months. That's the agenda.
I'm conscious that we're running close to the end of our time together, but most people would maybe not have been familiar with the story of online application, but they would know you because you've been one of the most vocal market commentators, or property market commentators, over the last 20 years, it's fair to say. Now you're sitting on some kind of unique data that only you have. So in terms of what you're seeing now, in terms of the trends, what you're seeing through the mortgage applications that you're getting, in ages, locations, what kind of trends are you seeing come through?
So there's a few things, because I quite often think about, say, what the Banking Payments Federation are saying in their figures, what we're saying. A few things do kind of shine through. There's about a third of the market that you can't get to if you don't use a broker. So you have to remember, if you don't
explain that, please.
There's lenders out there that only distribute through brokers.
Okay.
And if you are not dealing with a broker, you do not know about those lenders at all. They simply don't exist. So that's something that I think is important. I see that the loan amounts being approved are higher on average with brokers than they are for the banking world in general. And people would say, oh, well, that just means that brokers are getting people to borrow more. You can't make someone borrow more. What you can do is present their case in the best possible manner so that they can borrow as much as they are capable of borrowing. And by doing that in a market where it's so hard to achieve a property, that's actually good. That's a good thing, because you need to have the buying power to get in there and get started and then get the benefits of home ownership that come with that. And that's why last week I heard stories about maybe reintroducing 100% mortgages.
That Independent Ireland actually proposed that. And by the way, just before you go on to what I know is eviscerate that, or what I suspect is to eviscerate that, I would just say that the context behind the headlines is that they wanted to find a way for people who were trapped in high rental to have that represented, even if they weren't buying a new home.
I wouldn't eviscerate that. But that's the thing, I wouldn't say no to that.
Really?
I think it's actually... I'll go through that in a minute, but anyway, just to say, I wouldn't eviscerate that. I think there's a place where that's appropriate. Back over to the trends, brokers are overrepresented when it comes to single applicants on mortgages. And I think, I can't read minds, but my inclination is that couples quite often will have each other to bounce ideas off. They will have, twice the size of a personal network to ask for help. But when you're doing something on your own, it becomes so vital that you make the right choice and that you're able to, maximize your lending should you need it appropriately, responsibly, that I think single people will use brokers a little bit more than they would go direct.
That is so interesting, because that's I've never heard this in a mortgage context, but
Well,
that's actually a trend of buyers choosing buyers agents. Much more single buyers choose buyers agents more than couples choose buyers agents, probably for the same reason.
Yeah, now like I said, I can see the data, but I haven't done like a psychometric
why.
test with the people. Why? That's just my inclination. To just quickly look at 100% mortgages. So if you look at a person today trying to buy a house, and we see that they're doing it later and later in life, but if you said to them, when would you actually like to do it, it might be earlier and earlier. So, you know, to get a decent job, a lot of kids are being told you got to go do a master's, you know, and then you're not starting work until you're 25, and then you're paying crazy high rents, and now your ability to save is reduced. Interest rates are low, so even when you do save, it's like it's crap returns, and you know this becomes like an unofficial tax on people who aren't property owners. Yeah. And so now to save €10,000 10 years ago might have taken you know a year, but now it's going to take you 2, and rents are increasing, and it's like it's just this crush. And it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with the macro environment that you're in. So if you said to somebody, look, I'm actually going to just let you skip over that queue and get a 100% mortgage tomorrow, and if it's affordable, you can do it. Say to yourself,
when you say affordable, as in they have the repayment capacity.
Yeah, they've shown the repayment. And you say to yourself, some people say, no, that will inflate property prices. Okay, well, let's just say that it did. What did the macroprudential rules achieve anyway? Property prices inflated without it. And the central bank are always at total pains to say, oh, we're not there to do that. Yeah, they were. That was the narrative at the time. And it didn't work. It's a failed plan. So all you did, and I wrote to them in 2014 at the time, and I said, you are going to lock people out. Prices are going to rise anyway. This was seen in Hong Kong. It's been seen in a load of places. It's been seen in Singapore. This is a failed idea. They did it anyway. No one can even say where the 3.5 times income came from. They were super harsh on 2 sides with first-time buyers.
Across Europe, that tends to be 4.5, doesn't it?
Well, I'll put it this way. If you look at the standard income multiplier in countries, last time it was 3.5 or something like the 60s. Like for most countries, it's been much higher for much longer. And people say, well, we don't want the same thing happening like last time. Okay, well, let's look at what happened last time. We didn't get loads of repossessions, and part of that was because we didn't repossess. We also made it baked into the cake that people could default. And yes, they did respond to incentives. So I still refuse to believe that people just were like, oh, we're just innocent victims, because they went from full payment to 0. Like no one was making even half payments because the central bank banned repossessions at one stage. Yeah. Crazy idea, terrible policy decision. One of the worst actually in my lifetime. So, but if you were to look at people who had 100% mortgages, most of them didn't lose their home. And yes, they were negative equity, along with loads of people who had paid deposits who were negative equity, because when prices drop by half, everyone gets caught. So if you had a 100% mortgage and you know the terms were reasonable, and we have a pretty good way of keeping people in their homes, it becomes difficult for me to understand the negative side of that versus the other side of that, which is I can't own a house. I'm stuck paying high rents. The rents are going up. My savings is getting a terrible return. Every time you pay rent, you're only renting the property. When you rent the money and you repay some of it, that's actually savings.
So is that a potential solution for our younger people who are locked out of the market? Well, I think it's a different prospect if you're 22 as opposed to 42.
Well, imagine if they said, look, you know, age 25 you get a 100% mortgage, age 26 you get a 98%, age 27 it's 96. You could come up with whatever you want, like any system that you want, because it's all money. Money's not even real. Money's like it's a system.
Karl, that's a much bigger, much larger conversation for another day. If we start there, we definitely have to turn off the cameras.
But I do just want to say that, like, letting people make decisions where they can win as well as lose is a key part of a functional market. And if someone has a choice of being forced into this rent destruction loop for a decade, or get a 100% mortgage, and in most of the instances that worked out, what's the bad side? the people who did okay and who still have a house now,
Okay,
they're not
well
complaining.
then, final question for today, Karl. Last week we saw really what could be described as some of the first bit of emergency style legislation coming out to address planning. So we saw extensions to planning permissions that were what the industry had been shouting for. It had been badly needed, and it was lacking that it hadn't been there before. But one of the really important things that happened is that where units are caught up in judicial review, and we know, by the way, that we're talking about approximately 19,000 homes, and of those, 16,000 homes would have come through, or close to 16,000 homes would have come through the planning process successfully, and through the JR process successfully. But they might have lost 1, 2, 3 years. So essentially, it stopped the clock and it applied retrospectively. So essentially, it extended planning where it was absolutely appropriate and fair that it should be extended. So if we were to look at our new, or still kind of new, government in, and they were looking for some sort of emergency style legislation that could genuinely impact the people that you know are seeking mortgages at the moment because they're potentially stuck in this rental trap, or worse, they're stuck living at home with no prospect of getting out, having a returned home to save for a mortgage. Like, what's the few kind of quick wins that we could release people into being able to secure mortgages?
I don't really see the securing mortgages as the bottleneck. Like, we did have issues in the 70s where the building societies actually didn't have money. And that was part of what caused, I think it was the 1966 or 67 Finance Act, which effectively gave like a massive boon to the banks to get into house lending, because up until then, that's not what they did. House lending with banks is actually quite a modern concept in lending. So getting the mortgages, not the hard bit. It's actually securing the properties and getting that whole area going. So I see mortgages as being like a bastion of brilliance in an otherwise problematic market.
That's so interesting. You see them as a bastion of brilliance. I see them as a really broken product that if we wanted to achieve the same aim today, this is not how we do it.
Well, all I can tell you is what I work on and the people that I work with. And if you're having a negative experience, I suggest you go speak to those people. They're not one of our clients. And
but as in, mortgages are quite a broken product insofar as I think that if we were trying to get people into home ownership today and mortgages didn't exist, we would design a different solution.
I don't know that we would. Because that being the case, it would probably exist somewhere in the world, and it doesn't. So, like, I'm not fully convinced of that, because I put a lot of faith in things that actually are, as opposed to like some academic coming out and saying, "Oh, you could do this, you could do that." If that was possible, it would exist. So if you look at like our ability to deal with emergencies. People say, well, housing is different because it affects planning, it affects, all these other things, property. That's a lie. That is a lie. It is 100% lie, and it's only believed if you choose to actually look at something that's a lie and say that has to be true. Why? I'm going to give you 3 strong examples where planning, property, and all sorts of things played a part in a crisis, and we dealt with it. In the financial crisis, we took emergency measures, created the National Asset Management Agency, and that was taking in all sorts of property, all sorts of deeds, all sorts of planning, and dealing with a huge, complex, massive fallout for billions and billions of euro. They solved it, they did it, they got through it. During COVID, we dealt with an emergency. We took away people's individual freedoms. We told them that you can't go here, you can't go there. Like, that's basically national imprisonment, but just with a 3-kilometer range on your incarceration. And we also allowed for emergency centres that normally would have required planning, required all sorts of things, and we got through it. Third time, there was a war in Ukraine. And when that happened, we suddenly allowed for everyone to come, flee the war. I'm in favour of helping people who are trying to not get killed. They came along, we broke all the planning rules. We allowed people to create housing and accommodation that would be actually illegal to do for the indigenous population, even today. So you can be like housed as someone fleeing a war, but if you actually want to live in those places, an Irish person who has no house, you can't. And we have all these planning rules and emergency legislations. So we've shown time and again with big emergencies that we can actually deal with those emergencies. And every single time there has been a property, planning and geographic element to it. And yet suddenly with housing for the people who live here, it's like, oh, we can't figure that out. It's just too big an issue. We just never be able to get our heads around this. And that's bullshit.
So what could be done?
I think a few things. I think we should actually say that we need to turn the whole thing on its head. So instead of spending 50 grand to get a planning permission, I'd say, you know, if you've got a half acre and you can show that you can get your own well, to get your own sustainable, permanently sustainable water, and you can sort out your own drainage, that, and if you want to build, you know, like certain types of prefabricated homes that are like very rapidly available, that it should be up to the local authority for them to prove why you can't, as opposed to you to have to prove why you can build something on your own land. Folks always say, oh, what about sprawl? You know, look, okay, sprawl, but versus what alternative? Homelessness, no house, people living in terrible conditions. And look at the rural area region in Germany. It's one of the most productive areas in all of Germany, and it's a giant sprawl. It is nothing but sprawl.
What makes it productive?
Lots of people, and actually a broad.
Do they bring industry?
Yeah, and there's an agglomeration, which, you know, if you look at North Dublin, I live in North Dublin, who cares if the whole area between, you know, Coolock and all the way out towards Portmarnock, Malahide, all gets turned into housing? There's loads of housing there anyway, and people say, oh, but you can't deal with it because of this reason, that reason. I'm telling you that is short-sighted, it's nonsensical. Like, you could have container homes that could be stackable and have solutions that are, you know, there for people in those situations. Maybe you have its housing type that will only last for 60 years. Maybe we have housing types that are completely new forms of housing. You know, in this country, there is a place that has basically a housing experiment laboratory, and it's in a former large electric goods manufacturing premises. And they're looking at housing types that are just don't exist in this country. They do exist in Japan, and the Japanese are not known for like creating terrible things. You couldn't get that house built here. Our legislation doesn't allow for it. There are amazing new methods being done all the time, and you can't build them here. Now, when you talk to officialdom, they'll be like, oh, well, we're always open to that, of course, if it meets the standards. But to meet the standards, you got to make an application to meet the standards. That takes 5 years. You got to go through the process, the audit, blah, another 5 years. Like, officialdom in Ireland has a way of saying why we can't do something and making it seem entirely plausible. Yeah. And yet when we have to do something,
we can do it.
We can.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to, and I'm conscious we need to wrap up now, but I'm thinking back to an interview I did with John O'Shaughnessy, head of Clancy Construction, and he talked us through the moments where his construction company was able to go in and deliver by bypassing planning and traditional procurement rules during COVID to deliver buildings that we needed for healthcare across Limerick. And it was just a really interesting story. So I'd recommend for anybody who really is thinking along these lines to just go back and listen to that interview with John O'Shaughnessy of Clancy Construction, because it proves it can be done. So you're absolutely right.
That's my point. When we are faced with big crises, we find a way to get through it, even when it involves building, even when it involves planning. And yet when it comes to the housing crisis, we have this stubborn inability to deal with it, despite the fact of having done it in a planning and construction way.
But then it's clearly not a crisis.
Well, it's either not a crisis or there's not enough. Like, you see, part of the problem is, Karl, like, the people who are expected to solve this, they all fucking have houses. They're not the ones living.
Maybe they'll have 20, 30 or 40 year olds returning home to live with them, and that might light a sense of urgency under this.
But isn't it interesting though? Because like, if you look at you know, Dublin alone, something like 2,500 housing applications have been kicked back in the last few months. And at the same time, you've got parents complaining that their kids can't buy a house. And I guarantee you, I just totally guarantee you, that there's a crossover out there, maybe not everybody, but in a significant number of people who will both object to housing and bemoan high prices at the same time.
Oh, we absolutely know this.
They'll just have in their own mind, there's no sense of the cognitive dissonance of this entire contradictory stance.
Karl, the next time you and I sit down, when mic'd, we need to have a conversation about NIMBYism, because you are my favourite YIMBY, but we're not even going to get into that today. But next time, that's what we'll earmark for our next conversation, because it's a conversation that needs to happen.
Could I just finish on this point? My house is about to be enveloped by a new development, like several hundred houses. And in all the consultation process, I had the audacity to write in and say that my part of North Dublin is a lovely place to live, and I look forward to welcoming my new neighbours. And that actually ended up in the Irish Times, or maybe I think it was the Irish Times. It was one of the newspapers anyway. If you put in Karl Deeter, Malahide housing, you'll see it actually was a news story.
You're my favourite YIMBY. Yes, in my backyard.
But I couldn't believe it. Like, that's how astounding it was that in like something like 300 submissions, there's one person who said, yeah. Karl, and that was newsworthy.
Not only have I seen it, I have shared it as an example, and in fact part of what we're trying to do with Place Engage is to create a positive conversation around development, because actually what we see at the moment, while planning is a democratic function, at the moment it's we want it to be, but at the moment it is capturing the loud minority, and we wanted to capture the silent majority, and the vast majority of people are reasonable. But we have to park that issue for another day, Karl. We have to park that issue. Our next conversation will be about NIMBYism. But listen, thank you so much to yourself and to the team here at OnlineApplication for allowing us into your very cool building today. It's really exciting to hear about the work that you're doing, so we will definitely keep an eye on that. And for people who want to get their mortgage through quickly, they really need to be thinking of OnlineApplication.io.
Yeah, look, it's there's loads of brokers use it. If you're dealing with a mortgage broker, I'd ask them two things. Are you using the online application system? Are you a member of, the Irish Mortgage Advisors broker group? If you get a yes to both of those, you're in good hands.
And if not, don't expect that your parents are not going to get sick of seeing you living at home in your 30s and 40s. But that's all we've time for today. That's it for us on the Property Roundup. In the meantime, be sure to check out all of our other construction and real estate shows here on iPropertyRadio.com.